This module on the Next Generation Science Standards focuses on the practice of argumentation. Learning objectives. Upon completion of this module, participants will develop an understanding of scientific argumentation as defined by the Next Generation Science Standards, and have the opportunity to explore classroom structures they might set up to increase the climate and cultures of scientific argumentation. This module is expected to take approximately 2 hours, and you may wish to have the following materials available: 2 different colored pens, one to record your initial ideas and a second color to record new ideas after you've had an opportunity to explore resources. Access to the videos, which are linked within this module. Copies of page 13 and 14 from Appendix F in the Next Generation Science Standards, Science and Engineering Practices, the link which is provided within this module. Copies of Practice 7, Engaging in Argument from Evidence in a Framework for K-12 Science Education. Again, the link is found within this module. And copies of the grade level appropriate argumentation article from the NSTA website, also found within the module. There's a template for the journals that we'll ask you to write, but you could also use your own piece of scrap paper to create journal entries. There's also a graphic organizer on argumentation, which you'll be asked to fill out during this module. If you're exploring these ideas with a group, you might wish to have post-it note and chart paper to record the ideas that you generate. In this module, we're going to start by exploring 2 different quotes about argumentation in science. The first comes from NSTA's Science Teacher, and it's from the Editor's Corner from July 2013. The goal of argumentation in science is to reach consensus in a collaborative search for the truth. Scientists constantly critique each other's ideas, defend claims and challenge inferences, propose alternative interpretations, and engage in the back-and-forth debate that moves forward our understanding of the natural world. The process of peer review epitomizes the argumentation at the heart of the scientific process. I'm going to pause for a moment to allow you to look at this quote and pick out the words that you feel really are important that stick out to you about argumentation in science. The second quote I'm going to ask you to read comes straight from the Next Generation Science Standards. Argumentation is a process for reaching agreements about explanations and designs. In science, reasoning and argument based on evidence are essential in identifying the best explanation for a natural phenomenon. In engineering, reasoning and argument are needed to identify the best solution to a design problem. I'm going to pause again so you can look for keywords that stick out to you from that quote. At this time, we're going to look at 2 different journal questions. Throughout this module, there will be pause, which will be a pause symbol in which you'll be asked to pause the video. You'll repeatedly pause this video and then come back to it after completing a task. In this case, we're going to start by looking at 2 journal questions. The first question, question A, asks what might be some of the roles of argumentation in science, and when might scientists engage in argumentation? The second question asks, how is arguing in society different than scientific argumentation? How is an argument I have with my neighbor different than engaging in scientific argumentation? So again, the pause signs show up, and so I'm going to ask you to pause the video and take the time to answer those 2 questions. At this time, what we're going to do is explore a video located on Bozeman Science. Paul Anderson created a series of videos looking at the scientific practices within the Next Generation Science Standards and the cross-cutting concepts. In this case, we're going to look at his video that he's created about argumentation. Within this video, pay careful attention to the original journal ideas that you had, because later we're going to ask you to come back to those and see how you may have some different ideas to add. So at this time, again, please pause this video and then go to the Bozeman Science video. We're now going to ask you to return to your journal questions. Using a different color pen, please add ideas that have surfaced from watching the second video and exploring those resources. So again, you're going to pause, and when you're finished, please return to this video. It's always good to reflect about what big ideas have struck you as you look and learn new information. What are your biggest ahas? So the question we have for you is, what are the biggest ahas that you've had so far? Examine your responses and think about how your impressions and ideas about scientific argumentation have been engaged, expanded, or reformed. If you're completing this module by yourself, please feel free to record your ideas on a piece of scrap paper. If you're working in a group, you may wish to pause silently to reflect and then share with your elbow partner and possibly share out with the entire group. The next thing we're going to look at is some different resources about argumentation in the science classroom. We're first going to ask you to go to the Framework for K-12 Science Education. Practice 7, Engaging in Argument, is located on pages 71 through 74. As you read this, we're going to ask you to fill in the graphic organizer, Argumentation, to describe the key attributes of argumentation. How will students demonstrate this practice at different grade levels? And if appropriate, you may wish to divide the graphic organizer into different grade spans to help you think about how student proficiency and complexity grows with maturity. If you're with a group, please have a discussion about the ways students will progress as they become more sophisticated in their work with argumentation. So at this time, again, we're going to ask you to pause, complete the reading from the Framework for K-12 Science Education, and fill in the graphic organizer. Another really important resource to reference is directly the Next Generation Science Standards. Within the appendixes, Practice 7, Argumentation, has important information about looking at argumentation from K through 12. After finishing that reading, please revisit your graphic organizer, Argumentation, and add any new ideas or thinking that emerged from your work in the second color ink. If you're working with a group, you should probably share those ideas with a group and possibly compile those on chart paper. Again, after looking at all these resources, it's important to take a moment to pause and think about your big ahas. Think about how your impressions and ideas about scientific argumentation have been engaged, expanded, or reformed. If you're doing this by yourself, again, you might want to do this on a piece of scrap paper, but if you're working in a group, take a moment to silently reflect and then share with your elbow partner. So far, we've looked at defining argumentation and the role it plays in the scientific community. We've also taken a surface look at the expectations of what students will do in a classroom as they engage in the practice of argumentation. The next step that's really important is to think about the classroom structures, culture, and activities that help set the stage to allow students to engage in scientific argumentation. This practice requires that students engage in direct discussion with each other. And it's important that all students within your classroom have access to those conversations. So it'll be important to think about how will you allow students who are quiet, more shy, maybe disadvantaged, to get into the conversations that are important to have. This will be only a brief glimpse of this thinking, but it'll be an important step to thinking about how you'll engage students in your classroom in argumentation. To begin, we're going to really look at 2 journal questions. So the first journal question is going to ask you, what barriers will we have to break in our classrooms to make all students, think about your Title I students, comfortable and able to participate in argumentation? And the second question is, what classroom techniques can we use to set up to provide room for argumentation in our classroom? So at this time, you may pause and fill in your journal. This module has 2 articles that are linked to the NST website that have free articles dealing with argumentation. The first one is an elementary resource in which they look at argumentation in the elementary classroom and think about some of the structures you can set up to get more students engaged in the process. The second article is a secondary article from the science teacher. Choose the article that's most appropriate for the work and the age level you work with, and take the time to read that article and pause and reflect about what they say. So now you should return to your journal questions. Using a different color pen, please add ideas that have surfaced from reading the journal articles from NSTA. What techniques, structures, ideas, pieces of creating a classroom collaborative culture emerge from those readings? I think it's important to note that this is just a surface look into argumentation as a practice in your classroom. You'll certainly want to, as you engage in this practice, look at more resources that you can explore. The National Science Teachers Association has a large number of articles, and this module has other references you may wish to use that are free or available for purchase to help you engage scientific argumentation in your classroom. At this time, you've completed the argumentation module.